Good evening, everyone. As we begin today's meeting, we would like to acknowledge that we are gathering here today on the treaty territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, before them the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Huron, and Wendat. We also acknowledge that many First Nations, Métis, Inuit, and other global Indigenous people that now call Brampton their home. We are honored to live, work, and enjoy this land. Good evening and welcome to our meeting of Brampton's Planning and Development Committee. We will begin the meeting with the City Clerk calling the roll for attendance at tonight's meeting.
Members of committee, I will call your name. Please indicate your presence in tonight's meeting. Councillor Dillon.
I'm present.
Councillor Singh.
Present.
Councillor Fortini.
I'm here, Peter, present.
Councillor Bowman.
Present.
Councillor Paleshi is present in person. Councillor Willens.
Present.
Present in person. Councillor Vasante.
Present.
Present in person. Councillor Santos.
Present.
Thank you. I don't see the mayor present. And Chair Medeiros is present in person. There are 9 members present, Mr. Chair. You have quorum.
Thank you very much. Our next item is approval of the agenda. Does any member wish to add a business item to tonight's meeting?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I do have a few updates to provide to committee. First of all, in regards to item 5.3, a statutory public notice item, Emma DeMello will be presenting, the presenting planner, instead of Andrew Ramsamy, just for note of that. Item 6.3 are delegations regarding item 5.4 on tonight's agenda. That's an item in regards to an application to amend the official plan and zoning bylaw, Gagnon Walker Domes, Marui, Mateo, Silvestro, and 2088-205 Ontario Limited, 24 to 32 John Street in Ward 3. We do have added delegations. There will be a presentation from the applicant, from Mark Denardis. There will also be added delegations from Sylvia Roberts and Carolyn Arthur. We also have related correspondence for this same item, and it is under 11.1. There's additional correspondence from Victoria Williams and Craig Fowler from Algoma University. And finally, just in regards to item 7.1 on tonight's agenda, there's just a typo in the reference to the zoning bylaw the application recommendation. It should be 2020-0005 instead of 2020-2005. And those are the changes, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. I do have a motion moved by Councillor Willens to approve the agenda. Anyone opposed? I see none. The motion carries. Our next item is declaration of interest in the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. Do any members have declaration of pecuniary interest in the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act for a new matter to be considered on today's agenda? Okay, the clerk will also note for the meeting minutes. Our next item is consent motion. I'll start reading the relevant agenda items and members can identify any items to be held for debate. So they're all statutory public meetings. Our first is item 7.1, application to amend zoning bylaw, Mayfield Commercial Center Limited, Western Consulting, Ward 10, and consent. Item 7.2, staff report, community engagement findings for a proposed city-initiated zoning bylaw amendment for enclosed utility trailers, and consent. Next item is held for delegation. Next item is held for delegation and everything else. So essentially we have items 7.1, 7.2, and I'll hand it over to the city clerk to administer the recorded vote. Whoever's...
Councillor Dillon?
Councillor Dillon, just be...
Yeah, sorry about that. Just my sound went out. The first, the item in regards to Mayfield and Airport, was that put in consent?
That's in consent right now. Would you like to hold it?
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I'll hand it over to city clerk to do the recorded vote.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just before the recorded vote, there is also minutes from the Cycling Advisory Committee of June 16th. Unless those need to be held, those could be added to the consent motion.
Okay, so this item 8.1 minutes Cycling Advisory Committee is in consent.
Okay. Through you, Mr. Chair, recorded vote on the consent motion is required. All in favor, please indicate. Councillor Dillon. Councillor Dillon? Councillor Dillon? This is the consent motion. How do you vote? I'll come back to you. Councillor Singh?
Yes.
Councillor Fortini. Councillor Fortini.
Yes, in favor.
Thank you. Councillor Bowman. Councillor Bowman indicated prior to the meeting that he may be stepping away after the meeting starts, so I'll come back to him, otherwise he'll be marked as absent. Councillor Paleshi? That's a yes. Councillor Willens?
Yes.
It's a yes. Councillor Vasante?
Yes.
It's a yes. Councillor Santos?
Yes.
Thank you. Chair Medeiros?
Yes.
It's a yes. Councillor Dillon, how do you vote on the consent motion? Councillor Dillon appears to be absent. Councillor Bowman appears to be absent. So the motion carries unanimously with the members present, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Next items are statutory public meeting reports. Again, these are proposals. Public meetings are the result of applications made under the Planning Act. These are not proposals of the City of Brampton unless they are specifically identified as city-initiated proposals. Tonight, we do not have any city-initiated proposals. The intent of the public meeting is to receive submissions from the public regarding these proposals. Given we have persons watching this meeting through the city's live stream, we will have staff present each proposal subject to a statutory public meeting unless committee decides otherwise. After receiving any pre-registered delegations, members of the committee may ask questions for clarification but will not engage in debate on the proposal at this time. Committee consideration of the proposal will occur at a future meeting when planning staff bring forward the final recommendation report on each proposal. The city also posted to its website brampton.ca supporting information and documentation for these development applications for public review and reference. We will now proceed to consider 5 items, and after consideration of these public meeting items, committee will deal with the balance of the agenda items on tonight's agenda. So our first item is a staff report regarding application to amend the official plan and zoning bylaw, Glenn Schnarr and Associates, Ward 6, and I believe I will hand it over to our, sorry? Oh, my apologies. Nasir Mohammed, our planner from our planning department. Over to you, Nasir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members, committee members, staff, and members of the public. This application has been submitted to amend the official plan and zoning bylaw amendment to permit a 6-story residential apartment building and 7 blocks of back-to-back 3-story townhouse development. As you can see in this slide, the property is located on the west side of Mississauga Road and south of Ambleton Road. Next slide. The subject lands are located surrounded by a restaurant on the north side and low-density residential on the Mississauga Road on the east side, and beyond are low-density residential uses. And to the west and south is the Scottish Heather registered plan of subdivision. Next slide. The proposal includes, as I said before, a 6-story apartment building containing 138 units. Most of these units are 1 bedroom or 2 bedroom, and 7 blocks of 3-story back-to-back stacked townhouses, a total number of 105 units. And the density is 141 units per net residential hectare, and the floor place index is 1.3. The applicant is also proposing an outdoor amenity area and vehicular parking, a total number including 13 surface parking spaces and 331 parking spaces to be provided underground. They're also providing 194 bike parkings, all providing underground. And the access would be from Mississauga Road. Next slide, please. Our planning analysis indicates that this property is designated residential and open space, and they're also part of the upscale executive housing special policy area in the official plan. And the proposed official plan amendment includes the removal of the property from the upscale executive housing special policy area of the official plan. And the property is designated executive residential in the Bram West Secondary Plan Area 40(4)D. And the proposed amendment seeks to enact a site-specific amendment to redesignate the property as medium and high-density residential to facilitate the proposed development. Next slide, please. The property is also included in the Riverview Heights Block Plan 40-3, which shows this property to be executive residential. An amendment to the block plan would also be required, so which would amend the existing or future road pattern and the logging pattern. Next slide, please. The zoning bylaw designates this property as agriculture and a small part as open space, special section 2418. And the amendment proposes to rezone this property to an apartment A1 zone to allow the proposed medium and high density uses. Next slide, please. Although the detailed review of the application would be done with the passage of time, but at this moment, staff can contemplate some preliminary issues which staff will try to address during the review of the process. The proposal, the first one is that the proponent is proposing only one access to this property. So in view of the amount of density and traffic which would be related to the proposal, this would need to be, the single access being proposed would need to be reviewed. And also the functionality of the overall block plan when this property is, the lotting pattern and road pattern is revised. So, and the third issue may be that the property to the north, which is currently a restaurant, if it is to be developed in the future, so that would also have to be reviewed as part of the technical evaluation of the property. Next slide, please. So the proposal will be reviewed in light of the planning framework, which includes the Planning Act, the provincial policy statement, the growth plan for Greater Golden Horseshoe, the Region of Peel official plan, the City of Brampton official plan, and the Brampton secondary plan area. It will also be reviewed in light of the Brampton 2040 vision principles. This slide indicates that the application has progressed through the approval process, and it is currently at the public meeting stage. And the next stage would be the collection and review of the public and technical and other comments. And based on that, staff would be preparing and submitting a recommendation report to the Planning and Development Committee. And after the council has made a decision, it will be followed by a 20 days appeal period. Next slide, please. The report and presentation associated with the tonight's meeting can also be found online at the links given here. And for any additional information, I can be contacted, or the applicant's planner, Patrick Pearson, can also be contacted, whose contact information is given here. Next slide, please. So that concludes the presentation. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any delegations, Sylvia?
Through you, Mr. Chair, there are no pre-registered delegations and no correspondence, but I'll just look. Is there anybody here who wishes to speak on this item? Seeing none, Mr. Chair, there are none.
Okay, I see a member of committee, Councillor Pellecci.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, Mr. Chair, I guess I'm seeing this sustainability score snapshot in this report really for the first time. The sustainability score of 49 on this particular application, threshold achieved, bronze. I'd like a better understanding of how that's measured, and if I fully don't understand how it's measured and what it's measured against, I don't know how residents are going to understand it either. When I see a sustainability score of 49, to me, 49 was always a fail. And I'm not saying 49 is a fail on this application, but when I see a score like that, I don't fully understand. What I'd like to understand is more, I'd like to have more information on this snapshot when I see things like within 800 meters of a transportation line, 800-meter walking distance to existing or planned commuter rail, light rail, bus, rapid transit, or subway with stops. I don't really know anybody that's going to walk 800 meters to jump on a rapid transit system to go to work. And I think that's the majority of our residents who are jumping on the rapid transit system. So I don't understand fully how this is measured, and I think that would be, it'd be better for us to understand that. If I can get any comments from planning?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Pelletier. Hi, Councillor Pelletier. Alan Parsons here. Councillor Pelletier, thank you for the question, and appreciated the comments with respect to really how we might have some insights as to making the scoring here for sustainability summary more accessible and easily understood by residents and such. You're right, the score of 49, it does satisfy the bronze threshold, which is a requirement of council to satisfy that threshold. The score in particular, to be able to achieve the bronze, I can't recall exactly what that score is as far as the minimum to achieve the bronze, but I can say that 49 is well over what the minimum score is in that respect. I believe it's approximately 36 or so, but I would have to really confirm that. The appendix to the report tonight, in particular appendix number 8, it does have some details with respect to how and which the score for that sustainability really has been achieved. There's a number of criteria spoken to within it with respect to, you're right, there is the one criteria that speaks to really the proximity of the site to certain features and amenities and such. There's a number of other things included as well, being the type and amount of landscaping, the site accessibility, parking for the size of parking for vehicles, and a number of other things as well. As it is that we're working towards the recommendation report, which we'll ultimately bring back to committee, we can provide some additional details as to really how that score is achieved. But going forward, what we can do, Councillor Pelletier, and really through to all members of committee, we can work with our environmental planning staff further to try to improve the way in which we can convey that information through to members of council as well as residents to improve the understanding of those criteria and how an application fits within that.
Thank you, Alan. I appreciate that. And again, through you, Mr. Chair, to Alan and just to planning. I think we should have at the city. I look at this sustainability score snapshot, and with a score of 49 and an achievement of bronze, I feel like we're trying to be nice. And what I would like to see, I'd like to see kind of like the pass or fail. On applications that come forward, we shouldn't be settling for anything. We want top scores in the city of Brampton for any applications that come forward. And I think that when you're providing a snapshot like this to residents and to council, I think it needs to be like this is what we want to achieve, this is where they are, and have somewhat of a higher standard when it comes to applications that are coming before members of council. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Willens, aka Bowman.
Thank you, through Chair. Yeah, Councillor Pleshy actually hit the nail right on the head. This is just a snapshot of what this application put forward, I believe, Alan. But didn't we not say we want to try to achieve minimum silver at previous planning meetings or committee previously? So this is just a snapshot of what they put forward. But I agree with Councillor Pleshy. We should be a minimum silver on an application like this. But just my thoughts, and this is just a public statutory meeting, so I'm sure you'll have time to review it and come back. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't see any further members on the board, so I do have a motion moved by Councillor Palashi to approve the staff report recommendations, receive the correspondence. Anyone opposed? See none, motion carries. We now move on to item 5.2, an application for zoning bylaw amendment, proposed draft plan for subdivision, Congestion, Castle Clark Developments, Ward 10. And I will invite Emma DeMello from our planning department. Welcome, Emma.
Good evening, Chairman Medeiros, members of council, city staff, and members of the public. As noted by the chairman, my name is Emma DeMello, and I am assigned to process and review the subject application. The purpose of this statutory public meeting is to provide information to the public and to seek feedback on the application filed by CanDevCon Limited on behalf of Castle Clark Developments Incorporated. The subject property is located in Ward 10 on lands located on the east side of Brampton. The lands are located on the east side of Clarkway Drive and north of Castlemore Road. This slide shows an air photo of the site as related to Clarkway Drive. The property is located in a designated greenfield area and is bordered by agricultural uses to the north, southeast, and west. There are applications to permit residential developments to the northwest and northeast of the subject property in accordance with the Highway 427 Industrial Secondary Plan. Next slide, please. The images shown on the slide are a street view of the lands located looking east from Clarkway Drive. The lands are currently used for agricultural purposes and are planted with row crops. Slide, please. The proposed rezoning and draft plan of subdivision application will facilitate the development of 56 single detached dwellings, 32 townhouse dwellings, 29 residential reserve units, 1 elementary school block, Rainbow Creek block for natural heritage system, and 3 new local roads and 1 collector road. Slide, please. Lands are designated residential, open space, special study area, and industrial on Schedule A general land use designations in the official plan. An official plan amendment is not required to permit the proposal. Next slide, please. The lands are designated as follows in the Highway 427 Industrial Secondary Plan, Area 47, low and medium density residential, elementary school, valley land, logistics and warehouse and transportation, and special policy area 9. And an amendment to the secondary plan is not required to permit the proposal. Next slide, please. The lands are designated as follows in the Highway 427 Block Plan 47-1, medium density residential, low and medium density residential, elementary and secondary schools, collector road, and valley land. And an amendment to the block plan is not required. Next slide, please. The lands are zoned agricultural, and an amendment to the zoning bylaw is required to permit the proposed development. Next slide, please. The following site-specific zones are proposed for the lands. Residential single detached F 11.16 to permit single detached dwellings with lot frontage of 11.6. Residential single detached F 12 to permit single detached dwellings with lot frontage of 12 meters. Residential townhouse C or R3C 4.5 to permit dual frontage townhouses with a lot width of 4.5 meters. Residential Townhouse C or R3C 5.5 to permit street townhouses with lot frontage of 5.5 meters, an institutional 1 zone to permit a public or private school, an agricultural zone, and a floodplain zone to preclude development on the natural heritage lands. Subject application will be reviewed for consistency with various planning tools, including the Planning Act, the Provincial Policy Statement, the Growth Plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, the Region of Peel and City of Brampton Official Plan, the Highway 427 Secondary Plan, and the 47-1 Block Plan. Next slide, please. Issues and opportunities identified to date include the following: the configuration of lots fronting onto Clarkway Drive due to the need to satisfy engineering standards associated with the servicing of the lots, ensuring the development maximizes the use of pedestrian connections, including to accommodate all modes of transportation to nearby services and amenities such as the Gorham Meadows Community Center, ensuring the parent zones for the townhouse dwellings are appropriate to accommodate the intended tenure of the development, and ensuring the staging and sequencing strategy to guide the development of planned servicing and transportation infrastructure is implemented. Next slide, please. This application was filed with the City on April 28, 2022, and was deemed to be complete on May 10th, and it was then circulated to departments and agencies. Public notice of this meeting was issued on July 20th, 2022, and the next steps are that staff will continue to review the application and comments. Issues raised will be addressed in the recommendation report, and staff will advance a final recommendation report to Council for a decision. Next slide, please. The report associated with tonight's meeting is available online, and the presentation will be available shortly. The final recommendation report will be posted on the City's website in advance of the future meeting. And once again, my name is Emma DeMello, and my contact information is posted here, along with the contact information for the applicant, Ms. Maria Jones of CanDevCon Limited. Ms. Maria Jones is present this evening and available should committee members have any questions. Next slide, please. Thank you, everyone, and that concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much. City Clerk, do we have delegations?
Through you, Mr. Chair, there are no pre-registered delegations and no correspondence. I'll just look to the audience. Does anybody wish to delegate to council on this item? And I see none.
Okay, I don't see any members of the committee on the board, so I do have a motion moved by Councillor Singh to move the staff recommendations and report. Is there anyone opposed? I see none, so the motion carries. We now move on to item 5.3, application to temporarily amend the zoning bylaw to permit a temporary use zoning bylaw amendment to permit the outdoor storage of motor vehicles. SGL Planning and Design, ADESA Auctions Canada Corporation, 0 Queen Street East, Ward 8. And I have Emma DeMello once again. Welcome, Emma.
Hi, my name is Emma DeMello, and I'm filling in for Andrew Ransamy, who is the planner assigned to process and review this application. The subject property is located in Ward 8 at 0 Queen Street East in the east part of Brampton. The nearest major intersection is Queen Street East and Gorley Drive and Humber West Parkway, and the property is located on the north side of Queen Street East, west of Sumpac Boulevard, directly east of the CN rail line. Slide, please. Surrounding land uses include to the north, several 1 to 2 story industrial buildings with outdoor storage at the rear of the properties along Progress Court. To the east, there is temporary storage abutting the parcel to the east beyond Sumpac Boulevard is also vacant land. To the south, beyond Queen Street, are lands occupied by ADESA Auctions Canada Corporation's auction house and outdoor storage, and to the west, Canadian National Railway rail track abutting the land to the west. And beyond the railway, there is a warehouse with outdoor storage at the northeast corner of Queen Street and Maritime Ontario Boulevard. Next slide, please. The photos on the slide here show the existing conditions of the site. The first photo is a street view from Queen Street East, viewing the property towards the north. The second photo is an aerial view of the site with the property boundary shown in red. Next slide. The applicant's development proposal is for a temporary use zoning bylaw amendment to permit the outdoor storage of motor vehicles on the southern portion of the lands for a period of 3 years. Approximately 2.68 hectares of land is proposed for the temporary use of outdoor storage of motor vehicles, and the proposed development will also be subject to site plan approval for a proposed temporary access from Sunpack Boulevard. Slide, please. The official plan designates the property for business corridor and industrial uses. The business corridor designation permits a broad range of employment and employment-related uses. The industrial designation permits light to heavy industrial uses such as manufacturing, processing, repair and service, warehousing, and distribution. The proposal will be evaluated against the temporary use bylaw policies under Section 5.10 of the City of Brampton Official Plan. Section 5.10.3 of the official plan states temporary use bylaws may be passed without the necessity of amending the official plan, and an amendment to the official plan is therefore not required. The airport intermodal secondary plan designates the property highway and service commercial and prestige employment. The proposal will be evaluated against the temporary use bylaw policies under Section 5.10 of the City of Brampton official plan. Section 5.10.3 again states temporary use bylaws can be passed without the necessity of amending the official plan. Therefore, an amendment to the secondary plan is not required. Next slide, please. Property is split zoned agricultural, Section 1499, for the northern portion of the parcel, and the southern portion of the parcel is zoned agricultural, Section 2969. Agricultural 1499 permits the outdoor storage of automobiles, and agricultural 2969 permits agricultural uses and the outdoor storage of automobiles on a temporary basis until November 2022. A temporary amendment to the zoning bylaw to extend the current temporary use permitted by Zone A2969 is proposed. Next slide, please. The applicant proposes to temporarily amend the zoning bylaw for a period of 3 years from the current agricultural 2969 zone to site-specific agricultural zone. The graphic illustrates the extent of the split zone designations and the proposed amendment area on the south portion of the property, abutting Queen Street East. The site-specific agricultural designation proposes to temporarily permit outdoor storage of motor vehicles for 3 years. Next slide, please. Prior to finalizing recommendations to Council, this application will be further evaluated for consistency with the Planning Act, Provincial Policy Statement, Growth Plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, the Region of Peel and City of Brampton Official Plan, and the Airport Intermodal Secondary Plan. Slide, please. At this time, current items under review that will need to be addressed include the long-term intention for the subject land and potential for future development, and it's recognized that the subject site is located within the draft Goreway Drive planned major transit station area boundary along Queen Street BRT. These issues and others that are raised will be addressed in a future recommendation report. Next slide, please. The application was deemed complete on June 1st of this year. The next step in this application are staff will continue the review of the application and review comments from the public and advance a final recommendation report to Council for a decision. Staff will contact and follow up with those residents who have spoken, written in, or advised of an interest in monitoring this proposal. Next slide, please. The report associated with tonight's meeting is available online, and the presentation will be available online shortly. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact the city planner reviewing this application, Andrew Ramsamy, Manager Steve Ganesh, or the applicant. The applicant's name is Raymond Zimba from SGL Planning and Design, Inc., representing the owner, Odessa Auctions Canada Corporation. Next slide, please. Thank you, and have a good evening.
Thank you very much. I believe we do have a delegation from the planner.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, we do have Raymond Ziemba from SGL Planning and Design on behalf of the applicant for their presentation. And then there is no pre-registered delegates, but we'll ask in the audience after the presentation from Raymond. So Raymond, you can unmute your mic and we'll bring up the presentation, and then you have up to 5 minutes once we bring the presentation up.
Perfect.
Okay, you can proceed.
All right, perfect. Thank you. Good evening, committee members. I'm Raymond Jemba from SGL Planning and Design, Inc., the planning consultant and agent for ADESA Auctions Canada Corporation. Next slide, please. I'll be discussing the site and surrounding, the history of the use and proposed extension, as well as next steps. Next slide, please. So as you can see, the subject site is located northwest of Queen Street and Sunpack Boulevard, as outlined in red. It's about 550 meters west of Humber West Parkway / Goreway Drive. The subject site's approximately 11.8 hectares with a frontage along Queen Street east and a small frontage along Sunpack Boulevard. It's important to note the site does not have access from Queen Street due to the grade change, and it does not have an entrance on Sunpack Boulevard. Rather, the site is accessed from the auction house property south of Queen Street through an underpass. As Emma's already mentioned, the subject site is currently used for outdoor storage, which is associated with ADESA's auctions facility to the south. The southern portion of the site, which is hatched, the southern portion, which is identified with the hatching, was previously subject to a minor variance and a temporary use zoning bylaw amendment to permit outdoor storage. To give a little more context for ADESA, they held weekly auctions and it was supplemented with daily sales, and the operation processes over 100,000 vehicles a year. As Emma discussed, the subject site is surrounded by outdoor storage on all sides, and then further west, the rail. Next slide, please. To give a brief overview of the history of the site, a temporary zoning bylaw amendment was previously approved in November 2019. Following that, we did attend a pre-application consultation meeting with city staff in October 2020 to discuss the rezoning of the subject site to permit a permanent use. At this meeting, we discussed urban design policies and the vision of the area, as well as city staff noted they would be open to an extension of the temporary use. With the pandemic already impacting supply chains and the business model of ADESA and the general uncertainty, we requested a revised pre-consultation checklist, which was received in November 2020 for a temporary use extension. And the application then came forward in April 2020. Following that, we have met with city staff this summer to discuss the long-term vision in light of the draft official plan of policies and the MTSA policies. Next slide, please. So in terms of immediate next steps, we're working with the city and we're aware of the vision. We're working with city staff and we're aware of the vision for Queen Street and the Goreway MTSA. And we're working with both planning and policy staff to really develop a concept for how the site can develop while maintaining ADESA's operation that will inform a future application. So in summary, this is simply an extension of an existing use to enable us to work with staff and policy staff to find a permanent solution for the site. Thank you for your time.
Okay, I'm not sure if there are any.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'll just ask if there's anybody who wishes to speak to this item in the audience. Seeing none, I do see Councillor Fortini on the chat. He has a question, I believe.
Okay, Councillor Fortini, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you. I'm not opposing on the parking. The only thing is I like to see through the site plan when it gets final approved. You know, you come on the south side, we got the Hyatt Hotel, we got a beautiful banquet hall, there's an office building there. If we could actually see maybe along Queen Street to put a barrier or fence, because as you're traveling across, coming from Vaughan into Brampton, it just looks like all these trailers and trucks, you know, and I understand it's a business all piled up. Maybe if we could put something in front of there to cover it. It's also good for the business on the south side. So maybe when our staff comes back, you know, for approval or a site plan, see how they can work together to get this achieved. I think that I'm supportive. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I do have a motion moved by Councillor Fortini to move the staff report and the delegation. Is there anyone opposed? I see none. Motion carries. Now we move on to item 5.4. Application to amend the official plan zoning bylaw to permit a 39-story mixed building, Ward 3, and I will hand it over to Kelly Henderson, our planner from our planning department.
Thank you. Good evening, members of the public, members of committee, and city staff. My name is Kelly Henderson, and I'm the planner assigned to process and review the subject application. The purpose of this public meeting is to provide information to the public and seek feedback on the application filed by Gagnon Walker Domes. Subject property is located within Ward 3 and municipally known as 22, 24, 26, 28, and 32 John Street within the central area. The nearest major intersection is Queen Street East and Main Street South, and the property is located south of Queen Street East and east of Main Street. Next slide, please. Area context. So to the north, we have mixed-use buildings ranging in height to a maximum of 9 stories along Queen Street East. To the east, we have the Brampton Armory, and beyond is the Brampton Library. To the south, we have St. Paul's United Church and 1 to 2 story detached dwellings. And to the west, we have Chapel View Residence, and beyond are mixed-use properties fronting Main Street South and City Hall. Next slide, please. An official plan amendment and a zoning bylaw amendment has been submitted to facilitate the development of a 39-story residential and student residence apartment building with ground floor commercial. I'm just going to speak to the unit count as there was an error in the public notice. So for the residential apartment units, there are 25 bachelor units proposed, 133 one-bedroom units proposed, 103 two-bedroom units, and 15 units that are supposed to be 3 bedrooms, for a total of 276 units. For student residents, there are 27 units that are proposed to be 2 bedrooms, so that it would be 54 beds, and then 50 units that are proposed to be 4 bedroom, which is 200 beds, for a total of 77 units and 254 beds. Next slide, please. The lands are designated central area in the City of Brampton official plan. The central area includes the urban growth center and has a strong image and character which functions as the heart of the city and embodies a broad range of high-density uses. An official plan amendment is not required. Next slide, please. The lands are within the downtown Brampton secondary plan, area 7, and are designated as central area mixed use and office node. An amendment to the secondary plan is required. Next slide, please. The properties are zoned downtown commercial, which permits uses such as retail establishment, office, personal service shop, etc. A zoning bylaw amendment is required to facilitate the proposal. Next slide, please. The applicant proposes to amend the zoning bylaw from the current downtown commercial zone to site-specific residential apartment zone, which reflects the proposed use. Some of the highlights of the proposed zone include a maximum number of units being 360, a minimum front yard depth of 3 meters, and a maximum building height of 39 stories. Next slide, please. Prior to finalizing the recommendations to Council, this application will be further evaluated for consistency with the Planning Act and the Provincial Policy Statement and conformity with the Growth Plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, the Region of Peel Official Plan, and the City of Brampton Official Plan. Next slide, please. This shows the proposed renderings of the proposal. Some of the issues and opportunities that have been identified to date are the appropriateness of the density and the compatibility with the surrounding land uses, the appropriateness to have residential and student houses combined and how to ensure the separation, how to best integrate the proposed development with the existing neighborhood, and whether the proposed demolition of the listed heritage building on the property is appropriate. Next slide, please. Next steps in the application. Staff will continue to review the application, including reviewing comments from the public and technical comments, and advance the final recommendation report to Council for a decision. Issues raised will be addressed in the recommendation report. Staff will contact and follow up those residents who have spoken, written in, or advised of an interest in monitoring the proposal. Next slide, please. The report associated with tonight's meeting is available online. The presentation will be available online shortly. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact myself or my manager or the applicant, whose agent is Mark Donardis from GWD. Thank you, and that concludes my presentation.
Thank you. City Clerk, I believe we have some delegations.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, we do. First, we'll hear from Mark Donardis on behalf of the applicant, who has a presentation. Mark, if you want to come forward, we'll bring up your presentation, and you have up to 5 minutes to address the committee.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. It's Michael Gagnon from Gagnon Walker Domes, and I'm with Mark Donardis. And I'm going to make the presentation this evening. It's not often that I have the pleasure of doing that. Before I start, I'd like to congratulate the councillors who have registered to seek re-election and also congratulate those who have decided to retire. Thank you for your service to those councillors, and we look forward to working with all of the incumbents because I'm sure that you're going to have a very successful election season coming up. The presentation which Kelly made was fantastic. There really isn't anything that I want to add technically to it. Our presentation is a little bit more focused, and it has to do with what is really at play here with this application. So we have a half dozen slides, and we'll try and go through them very quickly. If we can go to the first one. So this is an air photograph of the downtown, and really, in simple terms, we often hear the councillors and staff talk about this being the 9th largest city in the country. It is a massive city, and it's only going to get bigger and better than it is currently. What we're looking at with this site is one of many sites which are really at center ice in the city of Brampton. And that notion of this being center ice, it's not my notion, it's your own plan's vision for the downtown. And this is not the last of these projects that you're going to see over the next 20 and 30 years. This is really just the beginning. And a beginning that started about 10 or 20 years ago when we started working slowly through the process of redesignating and building high-rise sites and mixed-use sites in your downtown. And you don't have to take it from me, but you can go to the next slide, and this is an extract from your official plan, and you can see the subject site at Queen and Main. And that's really, that's almost like you're young in Dundas. This is the heart of the city of Brampton. And that hatch you see there is the central area. And this is where all the action is supposed to take place in your downtown and in your city. We've had our head office here for 24 years in the downtown. We actually back onto this property. And to further reinforce the role and function of this property, if you go to the next slide, please, is a fantastic air photograph of your urban growth center as designated by the province. So you can see this site is just one small piece of the puzzle. There are literally hundreds of sites across your Queen Street corridor and up and down here Ontario Street, which will be the subject of redevelopment proposals. And it's all very exciting. Brampton is the place to be. It's one of the greatest cities in the province, and it's certainly the best city in the GTA as far as I'm concerned in terms of the prospects for the future. And I mentioned that development started 10, 20 years ago. If we go to the next slide, you're going to see that what we've put together here is something that we extracted from a recent presentation that the city had made with some stakeholders. The buff-colored buildings, a little hard to see here, the gray ones, are existing high-rise and mixed-use buildings that have been approved and built over the last 20 years. The dark-colored buildings that you see are proposals that are either being considered, approved, or under construction, all within the central area. So, I mean, I know it's difficult, change is difficult, we're all sort of apprehensive when we see applications coming forward, but the good news behind all of this is the City of Brampton is planning itself properly, it's processing applications responsibly, and in that regard, if we go to the next slide, you'll see, and Mr. Chairman, I'm mindful of the time, I'm going to wrap it up real quickly. This is the architect's plan for the redevelopment of this property. And what is really exciting about this is that this isn't just your regular sort of mixed-use commercial residential building. We do have a small commercial component on the ground floor, but then we have about 10 floors of students' housing for Algoma. And Algoma has been a success story for this municipality and your downtown. Without Algoma, in the last couple of years, I think we would have had a real tough time downtown during the pandemic. And then on top of that, we've got 29 stories of apartment/condominiums in a beautifully designed building. This particular architect we're working with is probably doing a half a dozen commissions in the city right now with our firm. And lastly, and if anybody's worried that we're not doing our homework, the last slide, and then I'll terminate my comments. Sorry, second last. I love this one. This is the ground floor plane where we have a covered entry into the site. And you can see we've got the elevator banks in the middle of the building, a separate reception area and elevators for students, separate from the one for the rest of the residents in the project, underground parking, a ramp to that underground, and a self-contained interior waste storage area and moving area. So everything's been well thought out, and we're continuing to work through that process with the staff. The slide that I was referencing is the next one about our homework. And I won't list them all there. They're a large enough font that even I can read them with my diminished eyesight here. We have done no less than 17 different studies and reports and plans, all dictated by the planning department. They've all been filed. They're being reviewed right now. And knowing how vigorous your staff is when you're processing applications, we will certainly be put through the paces of having to deal with the comments. And we look forward to the challenge and opportunity to work with your staff. So, Mr. Chairman and members of committee, thank you for this time. And we do hope that we will be able to get through this process expeditiously and then move forward and deliver another project into downtown Brampton. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, the next registered delegate is Peter Diamond. You have up to 5 minutes, Peter.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, councilors. I live in the immediate area. I am co-chair of the Brampton Heritage Board, and a lot of former members and current members have asked me about the Heritage Impact Assessment, which I haven't seen yet and hasn't been scheduled. But their concern chiefly seems to be that this is one of the city's most unique heritage areas, with the Federal Armories, the Carnegie Building, the Fire Hall. Indeed, this property is surrounded to the north, south, east, west by heritage listed or designated properties. Most of the concern seems to be about the massing against our traditional size. Another big concern is precedent. This building doesn't touch 10 or Queen, but is in a residential area. And many people are fearful that this sets a precedent that this kind of unchecked development can go right ahead anywhere in the city. So I'm coming to you to say the Heritage Board has not yet seen the HIA. I understand it's been filed or partially filed with staff. But we would certainly like to review this before we sign off on the application, and we would like to give you our best thoughts. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next registered delegate is Sylvia Roberts. Welcome, Sylvia. You have up to 5 minutes.
Hello, my name is Sylvia Roberts. I'm a resident of Ward 3. This development meets a number of major priorities for downtown Brampton, as previously outlined by Council. Council has regularly raised the issue of insufficient student housing in the city. This item provides student housing downtown where Algoma is already located and where the city is trying to get Humber Guelph to relocate to. The staff is concerned by the mix of residential and student housing. They seem to miss the fact that people live in student housing. It's residential. So residential and residential are not really issues. Staff is concerned by, one of the things is, if you tried to have the whole thing, student housing, that would be rather risky as Humber Guelph is not presently downtown. So you run the risk of providing too much. But if you don't actually provide student housing, then that means everyone has to come into downtown, and all of the roads for downtown are already basically at maximum capacity. So that means the university downtown is actually just making things worse with congestion. So the mix is not only appropriate, it's necessary to make the project work, and especially deliver the student housing which the downtown needs. I do have some concerns about the parking specifically. I believe it specifically says there is no student parking. I understand that it would make sense to have separate student parking and resident parking. that could be met from the fact there's a municipal parking garage literally next to it. It's, what, 20 feet from the building, 30 feet from it? So the student parking could be easily met by simply allowing overnight parking, because it does make sense to have resident parking, which is long-term, except from student parking, given you have a high turnover, and municipal parking right there could meet the demand as the city's own parking study has shown. There's plenty of capacity downtown, and you are losing, I think it's $2 million a year because you're spending so much more on the parking garages than you're collecting in revenue. I do have a little bit of a concern about there's a lack of bike parking. The city, as part of the downtown flood control project, is actually planning to have a bridge across John Street that is going to be pedestrian and cyclist, and this is not literally next to it, but basically, so there should be some cycling parking. How deep the parking garage is, it doesn't really make sense to go any deeper, but if you allow overnight parking in the city's garages to permit holders, then some of the planned vehicular parking can be converted to bike parking and satisfy that need. I think overall this project would be an appropriate complement to downtown and support a number of the city's key objectives for the downtown. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next and final registered delegate is Carolyn Arthur. Welcome, Carolyn. You have up to 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Carolyn Arthur. I am a resident of the neighborhood in question, and I would just like to reiterate some of the comments from Mr. Diamond around precedent. The significant height of the structure that we're talking about is more than double some of the buildings that are in the immediate area. Also the comment around comparing this to Yonge and Dundas. Well, I certainly respect the analogy and the comparison. My concern is that this is in fact in the neighborhood and not in the downtown core specifically. And I also like to share that, a lot of my neighbors are single women. We've invested hundreds of thousands of dollars in the area, and we want our children to be growing up in a community that's respectful of the heritage that the downtown core offers. I personally invested in downtown because I believe in our downtown heritage and the culture that it offers. I could have lived anywhere else in Brampton, but I love the way our downtown is, and I'm concerned about the impact that a building of this structure and size and density will have in the future amenities that we offer. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes our registered delegates. Is there anybody else that wishes to come forward? Yes, please. If you can come forward, and there is a sign-in book on the little table there, if you could just please sign in, and then you'll each have up to 5 minutes. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you. Thank you, Michael. Nice, good job. You kind of put in perspective. My perspective, I represent the property on 15, 17, and 19 John Street. Is a little different. I don't live there, but I do work there. And most of my questions or comments concern congestion, traffic, parking. It's not uncommon to see chaos on John Street. My challenge and struggle is to see how this project fits into, the neighborhood. As it was clearly indicated, this project and one of the considerations, and thankfully, is to see how it does fit into the neighborhood. With some limited commercial space and no street parking, we live it every day. It's not uncommon to have our driveways parked, people parked in our, business lot. God forbid if we leave the gate open and you find, street parking on there. With 78 spots and no street parking, even though there's a commercial element, I'm trying to figure out how this fits in there. And, I can appreciate that it's not the applicants, under their control, but it is unfortunate problems that they're going to have to address. As it said, the appropriateness of the density and the compatibility, whether it's emergency services, it's not uncommon to have a fire truck over at 16 John, an ambulance, police, to have the street come to a screeching halt. It is a one-way with street parking and 2 loading zones. Back to the proposed, appropriateness, there is only one loading zone. The garbage, when the region appeal does pick up garbage, they do have to back up. The street parking doesn't inhibit. It's not uncommon for them to drive over, various grass, knock over, poles and chains over on Harmsworth Lane. So, those are my concerns. I don't know if the appropriate infrastructure currently exists right now, which is the classic, what came first, the chicken or the egg? With the Queen Street construction, that obviously will go to her Ontario, and then the development, then is the city going to consider John Street? I really don't want to kind of struggle for 10 years trying to figure out why John Street is plugged. Even with the current construction on John Street, the region appeal couldn't even give us a straight answer in regards to John Street being an alternate route. It was going to be one way, it was going to be two way, it was going to be one way. Delivery vehicles cannot turn in some capacity, in some aspects, and so forth. So, I don't know if there is the appropriate infrastructure and the timing, but, those are the concerns that we have in regards to 15, 17, and 19 is, emergency services, street parking, where are they going to park? They already do it on our property and block our driveway. And it's kind of awkward, we try to be good, neighbors, but you know what? When they block and park in your driveway in your parking lot, it's kind of difficult and awkward. So, those are the concerns and the issues that I'd like to see addressed and answered, please. Thank you.
Is there anybody else that wishes to speak on this item? If so, please come down and you'll fill in the logbook, and then you'll have up to 5 minutes to address the committee. Welcome.
Sign in after. Yeah, I'd just like to echo the concerns about parking and the problems that we have on John Street. I live on John Street, and my driveway gets blocked quite often as well. And it's a one-way street. I don't know if anybody mentioned that, but at any given time, you can see people going down the wrong way all the time. It's already a bit of a chaos. But at the same time, I do congratulate them for wanting to improve our city and make more housing and all the improvements. But I'm just really concerned about the traffic. That's my main concern, and the height of the building. Like, wow, that's 39 stories. That's pretty ambitious. Anyway, that was just my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wishes to delegate? Seeing none, Mr. Chair, I'll throw it back to you.
Okay, so Councillor Paleshi, you have a question on the delegation or clarification?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just of the last delegation, sorry I didn't catch your name.
My name is Brian McKay.
Brian,
sorry, I apologize.
No problem, Brian. Thank you. Just a question around the blocking of your driveways, and I could ask Fab this as well, but Brian, do you know who's blocking your driveways? Are they deliveries? Are they?
Well, sometimes there's a lot of construction and what have you, and they're cutting down old trees that have fallen down for danger and what have you. But it's mainly just people coming for events, and they're always looking for parking. They're parking in the library or parking up and close. And I can still get out sometimes, but I have to back out and around all these vehicles. Again, it's a one-way street, and they're allowing for parking as well.
Do they allow for parking on your side of the street?
No, on the opposite side.
On the opposite side, but they're parking on your side just to...
At times, but that's rare. That is very rare.
Okay. I just wasn't sure if we had a concern where maybe we should be asking parking to look at the area.
No, what I would ask if I had the opportunity was if the police would start monitoring John Street and watching the one-way streets. It's a one-way street and people are going down the wrong way. And so they won't be as obvious. They try to speed. How do you speed going the wrong way?
Yeah.
So they figure they do it really, really quickly. They won't be seen.
So I've actually seen that on John Street before.
Yeah. Well, the other way is they can go backwards.
I won't specifically ask for the attention, but I know that that your councillor, Chair Medeiros, is certainly listening, and I'm sure that's a question that he'll be requesting.
If the city's looking to make money, there's one way.
It's not the money that we want to make.
I know, I'm just
Thanks,
having some fun. But
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. I see no further members on the board, and I do have a motion moved by Councillor Bowman to move the staff report and delegations. Are there anyone opposed? Oh, and receive correspondence. Anyone opposed? I see none. So the motion carries. Our next item is item 5.5. 82 residential units and 430 square meters, ground floor retail. So Neil Clarence Incorporated, Glenn Schneer Associates Incorporated, 75 Clarence Street, Ward 3. And I will welcome Angelo Embrico, planner from the Planning Division. Welcome, Angelo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hello, my name is Angelo Embrico, and I am the planner assigned to process and review the subject application. The purpose of this public meeting is to provide information to the public and seek feedback on the application filed by Soneo Clarence Inc. I'd just like to note that this is actually the second public meeting for this proposal. The application was previously brought forward to the Planning Committee in February 2020. The city is hosting a second public meeting as the file was relatively inactive for the past 2 years, and staff just recently received a new submission earlier this summer. And so we're just looking for some additional public feedback on the updated proposal. So slide 2 is showing the location of the subject property. The subject property is located in Ward 3 and is municipally known as 75 Clarence Street. The nearest major intersection is Stern Avenue and Clarence Street. And I'd just like to apologize for a typo on the public notice, which described the property as east of Stern. The property is west of Stern Street on Clarence Street. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the area context. Some of the surrounding land uses include to the north, existing single detached houses. To the east, there is an existing 4-story apartment building and an Esso gas station. To the west, there is an existing 3-story and 4-story apartment building. And to the south, there is existing single detached dwellings and Helen Wilson Public School. Next slide, please. The applicant is proposing an 8-story apartment building with 82 residential units, as well as 439 square meters of ground floor retail space. The proposal includes 106 parking spaces, which includes 82 parking spaces underground and 24 surface parking spaces. And an official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment is required to facilitate this proposal. Next slide, please. So there have been some minor changes made to the proposal since the original submission in 2019. Some of this includes a building step back. So that would be the portion of the building fronting the street steps back at the 4th floor at both the front and rear of the building. This was a change from the original submission. And the applicant has also provided a 45-degree angular plane, which is the portion rear of the building that continuously steps back with each subsequent floor. So the step back is from the 4th to the 8th floor. And the intent of the angular plane is to reduce the shadow impact to the single detached neighborhood to the south. And there has also been a slight reduction in parking from 110 to 106 parking spaces. Staff are still reviewing the proposed parking and would likely seek something more in line with the zoning bylaw requirement of 1 parking space per unit and 0.2 parking spaces per unit for visitor parking, as well as a retail parking provision. So next slide, please. So the property is currently designated residential on Schedule A of the Brampton Official Plan. The residential designation permits a full range of residential dwelling types, ranging from single detached dwelling to apartments, and there is no amendment required from this designation to facilitate the proposal. Next slide, please. The property is currently designated service commercial in the Brampton Flowertown Secondary Plan. I also apologize, I'm just noticing there's a typo on slide. It should reference the Flowertown Secondary Plan, not the Credit Valley Secondary Plan. An amendment to this plan is required to permit residential uses. Next slide, please. The property is zoned service commercial, which permits a full range of retail uses, including offices, banks, personal services, and restaurants. An amendment to the zoning bylaw is required to permit residential uses. Next slide, please. So the applicant is proposing to amend the zoning bylaw and is proposing an R4A zone, which is intended for residential apartments. They are currently including a special provisions which limit height to 8 stories and a minimum of 400 square meters of commercial space. Staff are continuing to work through some of the site-specific zoning regulations with the revised proposal. Next slide, please. Prior to finalizing the recommendations to council, this application will be further evaluated for consistency with the Planning Act, the provincial policy statement, conformity with the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, the Region of Peel official plan, and the City of Brampton official plan. Next slide, please. As I noted in the previous slide, staff are continuing to work through some of the site-specific considerations of the proposal, which include height and setbacks. So as part of our review, we are still working with the applicant to determine the appropriate building height, building setbacks, and the angular plane in relation to the low-density neighborhood. We continue to assess the traffic impacts, and we would require a satisfactory traffic impact study. And we're also assessing the adequacy of services, such as the availability of schools, community centers, libraries, as well as infrastructure such as water and wastewater. Next slide, please. So the next steps in this application, the application was originally deemed complete in October of 2019. All the application materials were circulated to departments and agencies for comment. And our first public meeting, as mentioned, was held in February 10th, 2020. Since that time, we did not receive a resubmission until earlier this summer. So as mentioned, we are hosting a second public meeting for this application, which is today, August 22nd, 2022. From today, planning staff will continue to review the application, including any additional comments from the public, as well as technical staff comments. Staff will advance a final recommendation report to council for a decision. Issues raised today will be addressed in the future recommendation report as well. Staff will continue to contact and follow up with those residents who have spoken, written in, or advised staff of an interest in monitoring this proposal. Next slide, please. So just to summarize, the report associated with tonight's meeting is available online. The presentation will also be made available online shortly. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact myself or my manager or the applicant, who is Sarah Clark from Glenschnar & Associates. Our contact information is available on screen. And thank you. This concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much. City Clerk, do we have any delegations?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we do have some pre-registered delegations. We also have correspondence 11.2. So the first registered delegate is Bill Ward. Bill is present. Please come forward. You have up to 5 minutes to address the committee. Welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. I am Bill Ward, and I've been a resident of Hazelmere Avenue for 43 years. My neighbors and I have reviewed the proposed plan for 75 Clarence and have some major concerns regarding the development of an 8-story apartment building and the impact it will have on our street and the surrounding area. First is the traffic congestion that will occur during construction. And looking at the diagrams, what I see is the cement trucks and other delivery trucks are going to end up parking on Clarence Street to unload. Traffic on Clarence already during rush hour is very heavy, and it will just be a nightmare to the residents of the area and the people that use that in their daily commute. The trucks will also queue on the surrounding areas in there because there's no other place for them to park. I've said about the rush hours, and Hazelmere is already being used as a bypass for the intersection of Clarence and Centre. Centre is the main one they go on, not Stern. And on our street, excessive speeding is all very common. Parking is our other major concern. During construction, there's no place readily available for construction workers to park other than our street, John Beck, Earlsmere, and so on. Following construction, I'm sure Hazelmere will also be used for parking from visitors and retail people visiting the site. I will note, enforcement of speeding, extended parking, and prohibitive right-hand turns from Center onto Clarence rarely occurs today. Furthermore, the size of the proposed development is not consistent with other multi-story buildings in this residential area, and if allowed to proceed, will only be used as a stepping stone for more and even larger multi-story buildings in the future. Traffic and parking problems will change the street from a quiet, friendly neighborhood to a busy thoroughfare and have a negative impact on property values. I guess one of our questions is, if development does proceed, what will be the plans to monitor traffic and parking both during construction and following construction? As a final note, I noticed in the package, but it wasn't part of the slide, it has a sustainability report of 36. So that, if I understood Councillor Pelleshi, that's even lower. And unless it goes by golf scores, where lower is better, okay? Okay? Thanks for listening to my concerns.
Thank you. Our next registered delegation is Christian and Kelly Burnt. Are they here? We don't see them online. I don't see them in the audience. The next registered delegation is Jose and Chandi. Welcome. You have up to 5 minutes to address the committee.
Thank you. Good evening, councilors and attendants. I come representing over 150 neighbors in the immediate areas of this proposed project that are opposed, and so it is said on a document that was presented to the city clerk with specific copies to our councilors, Mr. Martin Medeiros and Mr. Jeff Bowman, on February 7th of 2020, 3 days before the meeting, the original meeting of the original project. So these are 151 residents that are totally opposed to several reasons pertaining this project on 75 Clarence Street. And I would just read 3 paragraphs of the letter that was presented to the city and to what the signees signed specifically. We, the undersigned neighbors from the surrounding area of the above proposed construction project, hereby formally request said project, file OZS-2019-0006, as described in the application to amend the official plan and zoning bylaw 2004-2010, section 23.1, be denied. We expect the official plan bylaw will remain as currently worded, service, commercial use, maximum height, 3 stories, no residential component. This was worded in this way so as we can retain the power of the neighbors to keep the bylaw as it stands, but considering what our opposing specifics are. For this address existing at the existing plaza of 75 Clarence Street. This request to oppose project OZS-2019-0006 is based on deep concerns by us, the neighbors, the surrounding community, regarding increased traffic and speeding on side streets as well as Clarence Street itself, which basically is going to become a high-density corridor, which it is not today, nor it should be. as per our neighbors, as per the community. Regarding increased traffic and speeding on side streets and Clarence Street with obvious safety issues, let me remind you that there's a high school just off of Clarence Street that has no specific crossing signage for the students going to and coming from school into the neighborhood. Increased population density, infrastructure stress, and in addition, serious privacy issues for adjacent homeowners. Density issues are a very real and growing concern for area residents. In spite of comments in the Schnarr-Sonell application, Crozier traffic study of April 24, 2018, regarding traffic, area residents know full well the current impact of existing heavy traffic flow on their daily lives. And this is 2022 as opposed to 2018. As a concerned and committed long-standing residential community, we sincerely hope you're listening to these Ward 3 homeowners. And specifically, we met with the planning department after the first public meeting, expressing our specific concerns. We went, obviously, with the document that we were representing because this was a special committee of the 151 signatures. And they literally told us, well, to oppose or to reject, it only takes one neighbor. Well, there's 151 of us. So we sincerely hope that the recommendation report to be prepared by staff and presented in a future meeting to the Planning, Building, and Economic Development of the committee and forwarded to City Council for a decision include this document and the opposition of immediate 151 neighbors to said project of 75 Clarence Street. We sincerely hope that the City Council will assume this opposition in the 30 days of decision-making after today's meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. The next registered delegate was Elaine Pulver, followed by Mark Guerin. Elaine or Mark are not present. And that's it for the registered delegations. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak to this item to committee this evening? Seeing none, Mr. Chair, I'll turn it back to you. There is correspondence under 11.2 related to this item as well.
Okay, thank you very much. I see Councillor Pelletier on the board.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, through you to the clerk's office, do we have, Jose, we talked about the letter that he had provided to, I don't know if it was all members of council or just the area reps, but the questions related to that correspondence. Is that letter a public document now?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we're going to look because we didn't have it for this meeting. I went and looked back at 2019 when the statutory public meeting was held, and it looks like the matter was considered, but I don't see anything back then that shows the petition was received. So I'll follow up with Mr. Achandi after the meeting to make sure that we can get that for the record.
Excellent. Thank you.
I have the stamp and the date of the city clerk's office receipt.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll move that the chair be heard. Thank you very much. So just regarding, I do confirm that back in the day I did meet with Mr. Achandi and some of the members in which we referred you, I believe, to staff to get further explanation as we were just at the public meeting and we can't publicly state our position now to not prejudice the application. One of the concerns raised regarding density. So it's interesting when we talk about the density because Clarence Street, since I've been elected in 2014, has always been a problem area with speed. And I know that we've always, grappled with that street. Now, coupled with the fact that there's an application at the corner of Main Street in Clarence, so when we're looking at a traffic study, do we consider the whole area at large, not just specifically that application, or in conjunction with the other application? Because if you start seeing the whole picture, you can see that there's a lot of density being added to that small corridor.
Through the chair, well, I'm not a traffic engineer. I will say that typically as part of traffic impact studies, they do ask for other developments. They'll include information about other development applications that are happening in the area that are in with the city. In this case, I can't confirm whether or not included the townhouses on Clarence and Main Street. That is a little bit further. I don't know not being a traffic engineer, the exact distance they go as far as the applications, but they would generally consider applications that are in the area.
Yeah, and through you, director right now. I can't say it, my apologies. Yeah, I travel on that street every day. I go to there's a Portuguese bakery on Clarence that I go to every day, pretty much. So I'm familiar with the speeding trends. And the one thing that also I think that we have to look at as well is with the hospital there's increased, there's going to be increased traffic as well with I guess the next phase of development that's going in the hospital. And notwithstanding, I find it a tough area to add more transit. And again, I don't know. We'll see what comes back. But, it's one thing when it's a major corridor like Main Street or Steeles, where I could see transit as an important part of the mix, especially, along Queen Street, we add medium density, but we're increasing our transit orientation. But in areas, specifically in this Queen Center Street, I'm really going to look at that part of the analysis. How do we add more transit there? Because I'm having a difficult time to understand how do we address all that density there. So I think that's going to be a particular point that I'll zone in on, me personally. Okay, I don't see any further comments, and I do have a motion moved by Councillor Bowman to receive the staff report and the delegations. Was there correspondence, City Clerk?
For you, Mr. Chair, under 11.2, there's correspondence.
Okay, and additional correspondence. Is there anyone opposed? I see none, so the motion carries. Our next item, I believe now, we go to item
3, Mr. Chair, is 6.4, a delegation from Catherine J., SGL Planning Design. This is in regards to Planning and Development Committee recommendation PDC 138. That was referred from the August 10th council meeting to tonight's Planning Committee.
Okay.
And this is in regards to Bristol Place Corporation Solmar Development, 199 to 221 Main Street North, and 34 to 44 Thomas Street, and 4 Market Street in Ward 1. I believe Catherine is online.
Good evening, everyone. Was the clerk going to pull up the presentation?
Yes, we're just going to pull it up momentarily.
Great, thank you. Good evening, committee, staff, and the public. My name is Catherine J. I'm a partner with SGL Planning and Design and the head of Urban Design. I'm here on behalf of our client, Bristol Place. First of all, I'd like to thank staff for working with us to get to this point. It's greatly appreciated. In February 2022, our application for Bristol Place was submitted to the city with a 0-meter setback on the plans. The recommendation report of July 25th included a draft bylaw as an appendix where staff proposed 3 meters, 6 meters, and 9-meter front yard setbacks. If you'll recall, my partner David Riley provided a letter on July 22nd for consideration by committee to request that the setbacks shown on the application for a 0-meter podium setback and a 3-meter tower setback be accepted. On July 25th, Planning and Development Committee approved the recommendation report to amend the downtown Brampton Secondary Plan Area 7 and the Main Street North Development Permit System bylaw. The report was approved at committee and forwarded to council for their consideration and approval. At the August 10th council meeting, the recommendation was referred to tonight's meeting for further consideration of the 0-meter setback. Next slide, please. So I just have a few slides to go through to help give some more detailed information on what the zero setback means. And staff have prepared a supplementary recommendation report which provides some potential impacts of the 0 meter setback. In there was an appendix 1 and 2 that showed the site plan and a version of this landscape plan, only the details of the streetscape and the landscaping were grayed out. So I think that this plan here will help everyone understand what's going on in the streetscape. And although it states that a 0 meter setback has always been proposed, as you can see, it's not a straight wall across the property of a 0 meter along the entire frontage. It's important to note that approximately 48% of the building is not 0 meter setback. And so what that means is that there's a 1.7 meter setback for each of these proposed retail entrances. So you can see how the building articulates along the streetscape. There's also a 10 meter wide open space or a POPs between Tower A and Tower B. What you don't also see on this snippet is the generous setbacks on either side of the building. So there's a 6.5 meter setback on one side of the building and a 7.5 meter side yard setback on the other side of the building. So at the request of staff, as you can see on this plan, there's extensive landscaping being proposed between the existing property line, which is the line just below the existing concrete sidewalk, and the future property line, which runs along the face of the building, which is 5 meters setback. The proposed landscaping includes large planters that define an area for pedestrians with benches, waste receptacles, street trees, areas to gather. If in the future the actual widening occurs, it's important to note that there will still be a boulevard. And in my experience, a typical 5 meter boulevard is what you would see. So the distance between that existing property line and that future property line is 5 meters. There are also a number of designated heritage buildings on either side of this development that will make it difficult to achieve anything greater than a 5 meter setback. In my opinion, the future road widening would put the curb along that existing property line, and we would still have this 5 meter boulevard. It's unlikely that much of this landscaping, if any of it, would be removed. The existing concrete sidewalk could move between the building and the proposed landscaping, but it is also likely that a lot of this hardscape would remain. Also, too, the development permit system bylaw does contemplate patios to be considered in the public right-of-way. And next slide, please. So we just have a couple more slides here to help everyone visualize what this 0 meter setback means. So these are renderings that you've seen through the process that show the front of the building facing onto Main Street. Next slide. This gives you an idea of translating that landscape plan into an elevation. Shows you what's existing, the existing property line, the future property line, and how the articulation of the building is along the street. So it's not, like I said, a 0 meter setback along the entire length of this property. So this is in front of Tower A. Next slide, please. And if you click one more time, that'll give us the next piece of information. This is Tower B. So again, along Tower B, you'll see noted the 1-meter recessed entry, and they vary in length and size, and that'll be determined depending on, the retail that goes on here, how many doors would be along the frontage. And you can see that 5-meter road widening between the proposed widening and the existing right-of-way. And like I said, it is likely that when that right-of-way expands, that you're still going to see that 5-meter boulevard in the future. Next slide. Thank you very much.
So through you, Mr. Chair, also Mauro Peverini, my apologies, and Barry Graziani are present should there be any questions from committee to the applicants.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Vicente?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much to the applicants for providing this additional information. I think this is exactly what we were looking for. Both myself and Councillor Santos got a number of inquiries after the zero setback amendment was introduced from folks who were concerned or asking questions with regards to where would the front face of the building appear relative to the sidewalk. And keeping in mind that even in downtown Brampton, a lot of the buildings essentially have a 0-meter setback to the sidewalk, and so it's not unusual to see that. But given that the buildings that are located to the south and to the north of this development are set back from the sidewalk, we wanted to understand much more clearly what the applicant was intending with respect to a zero setback. And now that we see very clearly that that public space is to be part of the development, I think that this is much better understood, number one, and I think folks will be happy with the final design, and it'll be a very beautiful space. So I want to thank folks who are responsible for bringing this forward to have this presented to Planning Committee tonight.
Okay. There are no further comments. Are you moving, Councillor Vicente? Is someone on the board, Councillor Vicente?
Oh, my apologies. I see Councillor Santos on the board.
Go ahead, Councillor Santos.
Thank you so much, for, Mr. Chair. And yes, agree with the sentiment that Councillor Vicente has shared. I think it looks stunning, actually, and it's really nice to see the renderings and a better understanding of what that zero setback means to the applicant. And that being said, I'm happy to now move the report and the staff report associated with it as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we have a motion moved by Councillor Santos. Oh.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, I just need to clarify because there is a supplementary staff report 7.3. So is the intent to move the supplementary staff report and then receive the Planning and Development Committee recommendations, PDC 138? So does the supplementary staff report supersede? Just want to get clarified. So then through you, Mr. Chair, the recommendation, presumably from Councillor Santos, would be to adopt the recommendations in staff report 7.3, which is the supplementary report, and then just receive recommendation PDC 138.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Through to you, Mr. Chair, and maybe just in some response to the point that Mr. Clerk Peter Fay put forward, just want to inform the committee that the supplementary staff report that is provided tonight, it does include the full set of recommendations needed to facilitate Planning Committee's wishes to proceed with the application, and will also facilitate the 0-meter front yard setback as discussed here tonight.
Okay, thank you very much. So I do have a motion moved by Councillor Santos. Anyone opposed? I see none. Motion carries. Thank you. We now move on to...
The next item 3, Mr. Chair, is councillor question period, item 12.
So members of the committee, are there any questions? I see none. 13.
And public question period, number 13. Is there any members of the public that wish to come forward to ask a question about a decision or recommendation made at today's committee meeting? I see none. I'm just going to check in the clerk's inbox, and there are no questions, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so our next item is adjournment, and our next scheduled meeting is September 12th. Moved by Councillor Williams. Anyone opposed? I see none. Everyone have a good night. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the committee, we're just going to wait for the live stream to end momentarily.